If it's your kid asking, it's annoying. If it's a billion people across the globe, it's a challenge and responsibility. Farmers feeding the world. It's about agriculture coming together to increase both hunger solutions and food production. Please learn more and give generously.
Representative Todd Young of the 9th District of Indiana, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your district first and the types of agriculture you have in it?
Sure, we have a wide variety throughout southern Indiana, everything from tobacco farming to chicken farming, turkey farming, little bit of cattle, corn, soybeans. It's an amazing variety of different crops, and of course we have different sizes of farms. Most of them are increasingly larger, highly productive farms, but you still have a fair number of family farms. And even some more organic niche agritourism sorts of farms. And then we've got sort of a different order of agriculture. Sometimes people forget that those who make wine are farmers as well, and I've been particularly interested in that little subsector of our agricultural economy in recent months. So really robust agricultural community in Indiana's 9th District.
What are some of the biggest concerns you hear from your ag constituents?
Well, I hear a number of different things. Many of them just relate to the general economy and demand issues, people not having enough disposable income to move up the value chain for some different agricultural products. And then from others, I hear concerns about inputs. The costs of feed, for example, is one of the recurring issues. Transportation is another issue that frequently comes up. That's an issue where I've tried to lead some. We're still in the early stages of pulling together stakeholders and people who are experts with respect to the inland waterway system. Sometimes we forget, since so many of us drive on roads on a daily basis, that it's our locks and dam system and our riverine transportation that is essential to moving commodities. And so that's an area where we need to come up with a sustainable model if we're going to continue to upgrade the inland waterway system, just like our interstate highway system. And I think we can do it, but we're still working with some of the stakeholders on that issue.
On a federal level, what are some of your thoughts on the conference committee going on right now, trying to decide a transportation bill?
Well, you know, I'm hopeful we have a long-term transportation bill that allows us to move people and foodstuffs and all manner of other things on the 21st century infrastructure. But unfortunately, things aren't looking really good right now in that regard. There are some provisions that I would characterize as poison pill provisions that are being contemplated in that conference report, one of which would penalize the state of Indiana in a big way for coming up with a creative financing model to upgrade its roads and bridges. So, you know, I'll withhold judgment until I see the final report, but I think it's unlikely, based on what I've heard, that I can be supportive of the more of the same approach that seems to be taken in the conference committee. We need a long-term bill. My preference would be to extend the existing transportation funding streams for another short period of time so that we can go back to the table and really do it right next time.
Another major piece of legislation for Aggies is the Farm Bill. The Senate's debating that right now, and the House is expected to mark it up after July recess. But before that, the Agriculture Appropriations Bill is going to hit the House floor next week. And I know the chairman of the House Ag Committee is sort of cautious about people trying to push through amendments that are normally under the Farm Bill. What's your take on this?
You know, I tend to defer to the committee process. Of course, you have to look at these things on a case-by-case basis, and if someone makes a very compelling case as to why a given amendment should be part of the appropriations bill and that it must be passed now, then I'll give that a good faith study and consideration. But I think our committee process serves an important purpose. It allows our constituents, for example, to weigh in a very open public forum on any given amendment or provision. You lose some of that when you put forward amendments that really have not been deliberated in a lengthy way here in Congress. So that's kind of my thought. I'll have to see what sort of amendments are put forward, though. Right now, I don't know.
Shifting gears a little bit, the Farm Bill and USDA programs focus on renewable energy. As a former naval officer, I'm sure you're aware of Secretary of the Navy's Ray Mavis. There's plans to incorporate renewable energy into fueling the military, but then it's a little controversial because it's very costly. What's your take on this investment versus expense issue?
Well, this would be really easy if we figured out how to not make it costly, and so that's my hope, is that we come up with ways that we can gravitate towards maybe ag-based energy models that are cost competitive on the open market. I also understand that there's an argument out there that applies just to the military. It's sort of unique, and that is that many of these Ford operating bases need to be self-sustaining or more self-sufficient when it comes to energy, because so many of the casualties that our troops experience are a result of moving back and forth, moving personnel and materiel to and from these bases over long distances, thus being victim of IEDs and attacks on convoys and that sort of thing. So you never want to draw a bright line on these sorts of issues. So again, I'll look at these things on a case-by-case basis. I do default to a position of, however, notwithstanding the strong national security argument, of trying to support things that the market supports and trying to reduce government involvement in the energy markets. And so that's going to continue to be my preference here in Congress. What some might call a balanced approach.
Speaking of national security, what's your take on food security in terms of national security?
You know, I'll tell you what food security means to me, and it does strike me as being a component of national security. I mean, it's part and parcel with our freedom to have access to the food stuff we need to sustain ourselves, the foods and ag commodities we want. I mean, that's part of our economic liberty, right? So government, of course, has a role to keep open the sea lines of communication so that food can go to places where it's needed, and food can come into the United States. If, for example, we experience a disaster and need to increase our imports of given food. So that's a component of food security. Another component of food security is just ensuring that our crops and our finished food products are not contaminated or the victim of sabotage, especially on some grand scale. And we've heard intimations that there are bad people out there who have considered such plots, and government has a role to protect us from these sorts of things. So those are a couple of dimensions, as I would see it, of food security. But I'm open to others if you want to ask more probing questions in that regard.
Well, wrapping up, I guess. I won't probe you too much. Can you just give us a little bit about your background and how you got to Congress? And then what are sort of your goals for the rest of the short remaining time left in this term?
Yeah, great question. I have sort of an unconventional background. I have never served in elective office before. Frankly, never ran for anything, with the exception of class officer at the Naval Academy, and truth be told, that was uncontested. So this is really the first time I've been in a public position. It's been a great honor. Service has been important in my life. I joined the Navy out of high school, went to public schools in central Indiana. After spending a year in the Navy, I jumped at an opportunity to attend the U.S. Naval Academy when it was presented to me. Graduated from Annapolis, spent 5 years as a Marine Corps officer. In the course of that 10-year span in the military, the whole ethic of service became very important to me. So when I left the military, I spent a year and a half on Capitol Hill, working in the Senate as a policy advisor with Senator Lugar's office. So had some exposure to agriculture, and in fact even spent a short period of time as a staffer on the Ag Committee during that time. Moved back to Indiana because I'd been gone for a long time and missed the Hoosier State. And then I entered the private sector. First as a management consultant, went to law school at night, and then as a small town country attorney in Paoli. And I ran for office, frankly, because I was really concerned about the exorbitant spending going on in Washington. I thought we needed more bold leadership here, and in terms of short-term goals, many of them I think we've already accomplished, believe it or not. Not in terms of passing substantive legislation, because there's a lot of disagreement here in Washington, but we've highlighted just how grave our economic situation is within the Budget Committee, which I sit on. And I think I've done my part in terms of oversight on the Armed Services Committee as we fight wars overseas. Moving forward, I'll continue to make these arguments, and hopefully we'll have some reinforcements next Congress so that we can really make some fundamental changes to these practices that are bankrupting our country.
Well, Congressman Young, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.